Hello, it's Vivi. Welcome. So risograph is a really cool printing technique, and I recently found out you can print on black paper. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any video or tutorial on the entire process, so after some trial and error, here you go! This is everything that I've learned, my process, my tips, mistakes, troubleshooting, and general yapping. And then the topic of discussion. What are we drawing today? Something that's classic for the holidays. Death Note! So for this illustration, I'm gonna be using fluorescent orange and mist. Let's get started. I thought it would be funny if Light and L has a board game night, just a bunch of different random card games, Connect 4, Uno thrown across the table. I was very indecisive about the pose as well as the composition. The initial sketch I had Light, his arm was like this, and I thought that created a nice shape. But the more I drew it, I'm like, this does not make sense. This is all I have ready. You know what would fix everything? If I threw in another character. Oh, it'd be so cool if Ryuk was in the scene. He can be at like the top of the spotlight. Maybe he's holding an apple. Yeah, he should be holding an apple. Less is more. Get back to the real issue, which is figuring out how Light is supposed to be sitting at the table. I pulled out every single trick I could think of, breaking it down into blocks, pulling out anatomy, pulling up a lot of references, taking pictures of myself, pulling out a 3D model to pose in the camera, and it was just not clicking. I could not get this to work. How would Light actually sit at this table? He wouldn't be hunching over like this or like this. It would make more sense if he was kind of leaning a little back. Color blocking went by so quickly. The main contrast I wanted to focus on was the fluorescent orange spotlight, and everything else would be the mist gray color. Next up, we're gonna talk about file setup. I made a folder for each of the colors. Clipped on top of the folders, I put a gradient map. The darkest value would be that ink color, fluorescent orange. And then the lightest value, I put it as the paper color, which is black. If you are using Clip Studio Paint, you're gonna have to manually edit the setting in the gradient map so that it's a linear and not like a curve. In the folders, if I draw in black, it's gonna appear as fluorescent orange. If I draw 50% gray, it's gonna appear somewhere between orange and black. If I draw in white, that's the black paper. Here's things I would do differently. Instead of use like a pure black, I should have picked the color of the actual black paper because it's more of a dark gray. I will talk more about mistakes and troubleshooting a bit later in the video. But for now, let's get into coloring. In terms of painting technique, I use the lasso tool and I just fill it in with any sort of textured brush. That's it. Guess how many Death Note live action adaptations there are? More than 5, and there's a musical. Death Note is a very absurd and dramatic show, which is why I think it works best in animation and also really good in musical theater. Live action, I'm not really sure. I've watched the first one, which was okay, and then I also watched the more recent one in 2017, which was really bad, horrendously bad. And apparently they're planning to make a Netflix series for it, like a live action Netflix series. Why? A new take on the original Death Note IP produced by Duffer Brothers, Upside Down, the people who made Stranger Things. I'm skeptical. There are some cases where I think an adaptation works really well. It's when they adapt it to animation. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it works so good in animation. Transformers 1, most recently Arcane. I cannot imagine Arcane being live action, and if they decide to make it live action. Those are my thoughts on it. Number one mistake is that the ink colors appear differently depending on the type of paper it is. So the original reference I had for how fluorescent orange looks on that paper, it was way off, bro. Ideally, it would be good to check with specific printing studio you use if they have samples on how the colors look on dark paper. So for this print, I sent it over to my friend Paxe, who recently got a risograph printer. This is what my rough preview looked like. And this is what the first print run ended up looking. Thankfully, Paxe did most of the troubleshooting. They duplicated the orange layer and put it onto the gray layer. That way the orange is sitting on top of gray and not on top of the black paper. Second thing that they did is that they ran the print through the machine twice. So orange was much brighter. Third solution, something to note more for the future, is that when I'm designing these files, I should design with a more graphic, high contrast style. Basically, just doing more line art, having bigger chunks of shadow. Drawing it in this style would give me a much bigger margin of error. Oh yeah, and here is how it turned out. Due to the nature of risograph, each of the print is very unique. There's like slight misalignments because we had to run it through the printer twice. I like the effect that comes out with. tldr, I have to think, what is the emotion of the character? Like why would they sit that way? Why would they pose that way. I gotta keep things simple. If I catch myself adding extra stuff, that probably means I'm avoiding the bigger issue. The risograph ink appears differently depending on the type of paper. Check with the studio if they have swatches of how it looks like on dark paper and color pick that color instead of the hex code. If you want colors to appear brighter, you can print a lighter base underneath it, or you can run it through the machine twice and or design the illustration to be a bit more graphic. Here is to more risographs in the future. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you have any tips on printing on dark paper, let me know in the comments. Thank you. Also, thank you for 1,000 subscribers. I am very surprised. I enjoy listening to people talk through their thought process. You're gonna see a lot more of that from me. Anyway, see ya, have fun.